3 p.m. Please rise for the pledge. The flag is located behind us.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome all of you here this evening to the Borough Board special meeting. The sole topic on the agenda is the borough's proposed acquisition of the General Datacom properties. The format of the meeting, there are agendas here, if you haven't gotten one, will essentially to give you an overview of some of the history behind the negotiation process with General Datacom, the legal issues that are relative to that, and also the financial arrangements that are in the process of being made and will be made if the acquisition is approved. Normally at special meetings we do not allow public comment. However, given the large significant nature of this topic, we will have a public comment section after the presenters, and we will answer questions, as will the team that's here to present to you. I just would like to start by introducing the team that will speak tonight. We have Jay Carlson. Jay is the chair of the Naugatuck Economic Development Corporation. The NEDC is the economic development arm of the Borough of Naugatuck and designated as the redevelopment authority for downtown. We have the attorney for the NEDC who has taken the lead on the borough's proposed acquisition of the property. That is Gary O'Connor, who's with the firm of Coleman and Conley. Borough Attorney Ned Fitzpatrick is handling the relationship between General Datacom and the borough as a potential tenant in the building, both prior to a proposed acquisition and after a transaction will be consummated. He is currently at the zoning meeting and will return, so we'll push his portion of the presentation down a bit. To discuss the financing, proposed financing, the Borough Controller Wayne McAllister is here, as is the borough's bond counsel Marie Phelan, who is also from Coleman and Conley, and Richard Thurge from William Blair and Company LLC, who is the potential lender with this project. Many of you who are longtime residents know the General Datacom properties are essentially two parcels comprised of about 10 acres of land in downtown Naugatuck. I'm going to shift mics and walk over to a map here. You're free to come a little closer if it's a little too far away. The Datacom properties are essentially these two parcels. We are at the Naugatuck train station, which is here. The town hall is here, and the property known as Parcel C. We didn't get very creative when we named all our parcels are here. That is borough owned, as is the Naugatuck train station. The borough also owns the municipal parking lot that's located along Church Street, between Church Street and Old Firehouse Road. Properties we are discussing today are this large parking lot that borders Old Firehouse Road and the Metro North rail line. That's known as Parcel B. The other parcel, which contains a building of about 400,000 square feet, is the General Datacom building, is known as Parcel A. So in its entirety, the property we're talking about is a little over 10 acres. And you're free to come up and look at that in your meeting. As many of you are aware, that property was included in a 60-acre development area for the project known as Renaissance Place. Renaissance Place was a transit-oriented smart growth project that encompassed over 60 acres in the central business district of Naugatuck. It was conceived in 2003 with the borough, the Naugatuck Economic Development Corporation, and Conray Development Company. There was a 5-year window during that development agreement that actual construction must begin. Due to many forces, and particularly an economic climate that changed dramatically, that project, for many reasons, in addition to the economy, did not come to fruition. Throughout that process, and then just to conclude include that portion of it, the borough, the NEDC, and Conroy Development executed a release agreement in September, which essentially absolved all the parties of their rights, responsibilities, and obligations under the development agreement. What we're talking about is outside of that scope right now. But in the context of Renaissance Place, one of the major issues for us and for the developer was that essentially the borough only exercised site control over about 5 acres of that 60-plus acre development area. That included parcel C, which is about 2.5, this property, portion of which is leased by Metro North, which is a little over 2, and the small parking lot in between Church Street and Old Firehouse Road. The developer was unsuccessful in obtaining title to the other properties, and obviously the property we're talking about tonight, the 10 acres that is right along the river, right along Route 8, contains a significant building on it, was a central focus, and actually in the original plan for Renaissance was where the development was to begin. Lack of site control and economic development is very a big obstacle in terms of your ability to have what you'd like to have happen, what's proposed to come to fruition. The borough was not ever intended during that process to obtain title. That was supposed to be the developer's responsibility, but it didn't happen. Economic forces have changed significantly since the original envision of Renaissance Place. I believe it was October or November, the borough was approached by a creditor of General Datacom. Apparently, there was a financial arrangement between General Datacom and another company that essentially financed a portion of their business. That arrangement was no longer working, and the developer at the time approached us to access Mr. Conroy in terms of potential working towards potential purchase of the General Datacom property. After a while, it became apparent that that was not going to happen, and the discussion switched to the borough being a potential purchaser of that property. At one point, that property was assessed at $5.6 million for one piece and about $772,000 for another piece. And essentially, with the new numbers that have come out from the revaluation that was just listed, the assessed value of the building, and assessed value is 70% of market value. The assessed value of the building was about $4.7 million, and the new numbers, with the appraised value being about $6.7. The land itself is valued or assessed at $413,000, and the appraised value is about $596,000. We can make those numbers available to you, or you can get them off of visionappraisal.com. The negotiations for this property, which have been quite private for some time and have been ongoing for many months, have concluded in the sales price for the purchase of that property totals at $2 million. Attorney O'Connor will explain to you the negotiation process, some of the legal issues. Clearly, that property was once an industrial property, which potentially subject to remediation costs. Attorney O'Connor will get into some of that, but essentially, you will ask the question, what does it cost to remediate that property? And the answer that you will receive is that that number varies significantly depending on what the use or reuse of that property will be. The traditional method of brownfield remediation was to remove amounts of soil and bring in an equal amount of soil that was clean to a site. One thing we learned about remediating parcel C, which did take us 3 times, was essentially that remediating today under modern standards is not something that you should necessarily do without a plan of reuse. There are ways under current brownfield remediation law to de-restrict certain portions of the property depending on what the ultimate use will be. So at this point, we have environmental assessment information on that property. General Datacom allowed us to, through a site access agreement, perform that testing, and we have done so through a grant from the federal EPA Brownfields program to get data on that property. The collective thought behind this is our future. The urban core of our town is in this location. We own property across the street, and we own this property. But what happens to downtown Naugatuck will, in large part, not just tomorrow, but for years in the future, be determined by what is redeveloped on that site. When you don't own a property, and this is one of the questions that I get most often from people who are wondering, what can we do for economic development? The common question is, why can't business X come to Naugatuck? There's lots of answers to that. Some have to do in the retail segment for demographic information, traffic counts, population, densities, and socioeconomic factors. But the reality is if you don't own it, you don't control it. And at some point, the potential exists for that property developing with little control by the borough, but for our zoning laws. The alternative of that is that that property sits there as it has since I've been a child, without redevelopment on it. And we go through another cycle, another generation of lack of any downtown redevelopment. This initiative that we are putting forth, this proposal, it's well thought out. It's taken many months to put together, but it is bold. It means that we as a community are deciding we want to control our destiny in a large portion of our central business district that's located along Route 8, along the Naugatuck River, has an active rail line in it, and is at the very core of the central business district. So that is the context in which we come to you as a board this evening. The Naugatuck Economic Development Corporation has approved the acquisition of this property by its board. That has no legal significance whatsoever, but the creation of that entity was to take economic development outside the realm of the political arena and put it in the hands of a bipartisan public-private partnership that seeks to do what's right for Naugatuck in the long term. And I think they have been very successful in keeping that spirit. Members of this board have been members of that board at various times. Some still are. But essentially, we come forward to you tonight in a very open manner to explain what the proposal is and where we need to move forward. One thing that I did not mention to touch on, and Gary will get into this a little further. You may have heard that the borough passed a resolution a couple months ago to authorize the taking of the property, the acquisition to include the taking by eminent domain, which essentially means under law we would be taking the property and compensating the owner for it. We have no, and have never had the intention of doing that. However, there is a unique exclusion in the Connecticut Brownfield statutes that allows the borough to take title to a property and be exempt from what's called the Transfer Act, which is something that triggers certain requirements for owners to clean property. The threat of eminent domain excludes the borough from the taking, or excludes the borough from the Transfer Act, even if we do not intend to use it. And as I said, Gary will touch on that a little bit further. I've talked a lot, and I don't want this to go on too much longer in terms of not having the community talk on it. So with that, I will introduce my good friend and the chair of the Naugatuck Economic Development Corporation, Jay Carlson, to just explain a little bit of the history, because he's been involved in this since the very beginning. Thanks, Jay.
Well, now that America is can you guys hear me all right? I need a microphone. Now that the mayor has talked about everything I was going to talk about, I get to talk. Sorry. No, it's quite all right. Actually, just to remind everybody a little bit, back in the late 90s, under Mayor Taft's guidance, and at the time, Bob was a Burgess, and Chris Gerber, I believe, was also a Burgess. The thought of what did we need to do as a town to further economic development, because it had been so disjointed for so many years for a whole variety of reasons. It's like, what are we going to do? And the Mount Auburn study was born, and out of the Mount Auburn study, the Naugatuck Economic Development Corporation was formed. And as Bob just said, it's a bipartisan, by design. It has members of the community, it has business members, it has members of the Board of Mayor Burgesses, as well as all the other boards of town finance, Board of Education, and whatnot. That's all done so that we can continue to move forward the economic development initiatives of this town. And we've gone through now 4 or 5 administrations from both sides, Republicans and Democrats alike. And one of the things about Naugatuck that I love is that it really doesn't matter what party you're from, because we really do a great job of being nonpartisan here. I wish that the, no, that's not me. That's not me. I wish that the nation would be able to work the way that the people in Naugatuck work, because we do what's right for the townsfolk, and we do what's right for the population as a whole. All that being said, the Economic Development Corporation has been very successful in the industrial park. It's been very successful in bringing in other jobs and other businesses throughout the community. And 6 or so years ago, we entered into an agreement with Alex Conroy as the preferred developer for downtown Naugatuck. Alex had a vision for this town that we all eagerly joined into, because it's exactly what I think all of us still want to see this downtown look like. 2008 happened, and 2008 changed the entire nation. It didn't just change Naugatuck, it changed the state, it changed the nation,